Hi, this is Ian Desher, author of William Shakespeare's Star Wars, and you are listening to Coffee with Kenobi. With Dan Z, this is the podcast you're looking for.
The longer this lockdown continues, the higher the chance you'll be discovered. We need to move. Now.
Why can't I find any record of the vault Omega's held in?
Step out of there. What's the situation?
Listen. I know you've all been through enough. You deserve your freedom. But Omega and I can't do this alone. Shoot the binders. I can't. They're too close.
This is James Arnold Taylor, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi. I have a good feeling about this.
In May of 2021, the first episode of Star Wars The Bad Batch debuted. It was 16 episodes long, lasted till August 13th. Everyone loved it. These characters of The Bad Batch, Clone Force 99, Wrecker, Hunter, Tech, Crosshair, and later Echo, they stormed into our hearts as Star Wars fans. These were characters that the idea came from George Lucas, which makes it extra special. I think, I don't know how much idea he had, but he had this idea of these elite clones. Jennifer Corbett's the head writer, Brad Rouse, the supervising director, and then there's a guy named Dave Filoni. You may have heard of. He's one of the executive producers, along with Athena Portillo. Then season 2 comes out from January 4th to March 29th of 2023. And then we have our third and final season, February 21st to May 1st of 2024. So really, just been a couple of years. We've gotten a lot of great content. And now, of course, if you're listening, you know that the Cavalry has arrived. The last episode in season 3, the 15th episode, and the last episode of Star Wars The Bad Batch has aired. So I have brought in my own personal cavalry to help me break down this episode. First, my co-pilot for all things The Bad Batch, Mason Zehr. Mason, how does it feel to be talking about the last episode of The Bad Batch?
Yeah, it's crazy. It felt like when it first started, you were like, oh, I hope this never ends, but here we are.
But here we are. Our other member of the cavalry, she is often cited as one of the MVPs of Star Wars fandom. She certainly is one of my rocks in Coffee with Kenobi. The one and only Mary Perdue. Mary, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much, Dan. It's great to be here with you and Mason. I love it.
And you've got a extra special glow. Someone had a birthday recently.
Yes, yesterday. Spent the day at Batu East, running around with some friends and family and just enjoying a little bit of time at Oga's and just enjoying the day and being a Star Wars fan, and one more rotation around the sun or the twin suns, depending on if I'm on Earth or on Batu.
Or Florida, which
Or Florida.
might feel like twin suns. And by now you probably walk into Oga's because you are a Floridian. And do they just say Norm like in Cheers when you walk in?
No, actually not. We don't get in there that often, but yeah.
Hey, it's great. I love living vicariously through it. It's great to have you back on the show. You, of course, are a regular of CWK Live as well. And you're also a regular of Star Wars The Bad Batch. Now, The Bad Batch, I've said it before. I still feel this way after seeing everything for this series. I still say it's my second favorite Star Wars animated episode of all time. Rebels is the top. I will say there's not a huge gap between this one and The Bad Batch, but it's significant. It's enough. It's enough. And then I think Bad Batch and Clone Wars are closer to each other than I would have said maybe about 2 months ago, and we'll probably talk about the reasons why. But this is a great series, Mary. Overall, how have you felt about The Bad Batch?
I've loved it. I've thought it's been a great extension of the Clone Wars. It let us see more of what happened, really after episode 3 of the movies. And there's a huge gap even though we've had Rebels now, we've seen that, but that's closer to when A New Hope happened. So, there's that big gap in there that, what did happen? What happened to the clones? What happened to the people, who were fighting or beginning to fight against the Empire? Just nice to be able to see what else is happening in that universe. And it doesn't have to revolve around the Skywalker family. It doesn't have to revolve around some of the people that we saw in the prequels, that there are other people out there, other things are happening. And it was nice to be privy to it and be able to see what else was going on.
I love that, and I certainly agree. I think it's a very, very, very special series that I will always treasure. Mason, what about you? You've been talking about this since the first episode. What will you think about when you think about the Bad Batch and its legacy?
Yeah, when I think about the Bad Batch, I just think about when Star Wars and all series are like trying to get family together. This is how you get family together. Like just right now, we're talking and getting together. And then it's just been really a phenomenal series that people have enjoyed. And I think the series has succeeded past the limits a lot.
I'm glad you enjoyed it, because I've certainly enjoyed watching with you. And I can tell because of the excitement. So let's talk about this episode specifically. Mary, we will start with you. The Cavalry Has Arrived, Season 3, Episode 15, the final episode of the series. What's one word you would use to describe it and overall reactions to the episode?
My one word is together. They repeatedly said, we are staying together. We are doing this together. We are going to complete this mission together. Now, not that they were always one cohesive group, but at least we had like Echo and Omega there together while they were doing their part of the mission, and then Wrecker and Hunter and Crosshair. And even when it looked like they were going to separate a couple of times, they said, we're staying together. And I just thought that was such a great way to end the series and kind of put, that final little touch to it, that they were together. And we've seen in the past that when our heroes are not together, bad things happen. And in this case, they stayed together and not so bad things happened.
Mason, what about you? One word and overall reactions, overall thoughts on the episode.
Okay, first I'm going to turn back. I think it was last week or maybe a few weeks ago. I had my word as loyalty. And I'm going to stick with that because just like Mary said, they were together the whole time. They had loyalty to one another, and any time they could have turned back, but they just kept going.
Outstanding. My word for this is resolution. This story, I think that one of the biggest challenges to wrapping up a series, a book series, a graphic novel, a streaming series, a movie series, it's so hard to meet expectations, to deliver, to remember key plot points throughout the series or the story itself, and to provide a finale that's worthy of the show. This finale is worthy of the show. It's worthy of the characters. And one of the things that I think is so important and critical that you don't often see is there were no gimmicks, right? There was no like, oh, we've got to kill someone to leave a mark. We've got to show that someone is secretly has a special long lost cousin who actually is a Jedi that rides a pony or whatever kind of crazy stuff. There were no stunts. This was just like, this could have been just the end of the season, except for the very ending itself. And it would have been very satisfactory. But it wasn't satisfactory. I think it delivered, and it delivered without bells and whistles, but just this was an appropriate Bad Batch episode that just so happened to be a finale that wrapped up a lot of things. And I say bravo for actually doing that. They were able to resist that temptation to throw a bunch of stunts. Like, so many sitcoms end with, oh, by the way, the family's moving. Oh, by the way, they're breaking out. All these crazy things. Oh, we're going to close down the bar of Cheers. Oh, Seinfeld and his gang got put in jail. There's so many crazy things happen that have nothing to do with the series, and this took care of it in a very satisfying way.
I agree. Yes.
All right, so that's it for the show. Thanks, everybody. Be sure to tip your waitress on the way out. Just kidding. Let's talk about some things that worked for us about the finale. Anything you want to talk about? And Mason, I want to turn it over to you first. What's something that really worked for you that you really enjoyed about this finale?
Okay, one thing I thought, if not one of them, every single one of them was going to die except for Omega and maybe Hunter. And I'm glad that they didn't make any one of them die, because I was worried the whole time, oh no, this is going to happen. This is going to happen, so this person's going to die this way. But I'm so glad that they didn't do it. Like you said, there are no gimmicks. They just kept the series how it should be.
Yeah, they didn't like, I was concerned. I mean, you've got to have that fear in there, but we got that with Echo. And not Echo, with Tech. And they didn't do that. And I didn't know what I expected, because as you know, I tried not to do anything like that because I ended up getting disappointed. So it was there, especially with Wrecker and him being injured, which again, they had to do, because if he's not injured, then you're not as worried at the end, because he's so strong and powerful and such a good fighter. So I also really appreciate that. Ties into what as you alluded to just a few moments ago, that there aren't gimmicks or things like that. But it also served the story for them to survive, I think. And very, very, very cool. Mary, anything on that, or do you want to go to yours? Your first one.
I agree. I think they did a great job with that, not having any little gimmicks, not having any little 3D pop-up effect, like in a how 3D movies do, and they just have to put some little gotcha thing in there. And I think they did a really good job, even though Jennifer Corbett was ripping our hearts out for the last couple of days with her cryptic tweets and things. But I think they did a real good job with that. I think it was a good way to end it without having things happen that didn't need to happen. Like you were saying, how various programs have ended with strange things, for an ending. And this one, it was just the Bad Batch, and it just rolled right into what happens however many years from now. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, what would you like to kick it off for, something that stood out to you?
Oh, as far as overall,
anything, anything from the any plot points, lines, significant moments, anything.
I think that they did such a great job of really letting Omega truly grow, and they've done it the entire series. They've really done it this season, but this episode, there were a number of times that I think in the first season, Hunter would have been saying, no, you need to stay here or whatever. And this time there were no questions. Like, she was full-fledged part of this group, and she has been all season, as we've seen. But for example, when she was able to get the kids out, and Echo and Emery meet them, and Echo says to Emery, take the kids, here's the coordinates, take the kids while we finish the mission. And there was no question there that Omega was staying. She was not a kid. She was not going with the kids. She was staying with her team, and she was finishing that mission. And just everything from the whole episode, but it just kept rolling. Everything that she did, there was no question. There was no, are you worried about doing this? Do you think you can or can't do this? It was, okay, you're doing this, or she said, I'm doing this. It was just seamless how she was, in many ways, almost the leader of this mission, even after the kids were gone, as far as saving her brothers from Hemlock's little gadgets and so forth. So I really thought that was all the way through this episode, she was just phenomenal. The way they had written her, and how Michelle Ang just absolutely does an amazing job with her voice.
So, and you know what else is nice about that, and those are excellent points, is that I guess I didn't think about this before until you just mentioned that to kind of click something. But earlier in the season, when her doll that's made of straw, that the child, one of the kids not takes it, but gets it from memory. That was a passing of a baton. That was a sign. That was a visible physical sign, a manifestation that Omega is no longer a child. She's an adult.
Yes, and she did not ask for it, and she did not
Nope.
mention that was her doll.
It wasn't. She doesn't need that security anymore.
She does not.
And in that moment, you just so beautifully alluded to, it's not even a question, or like there's no hesitation from anyone. It's like, no, she's part of the Brotherhood. She's part of this. She's part of Clone Force 99. So of course she's a factor. Of course she's one of them. And that was a great thing too. Another thing I really liked about this, Jennifer Corbett had tweeted that gif of Luke Skywalker from The Last Jedi saying, "This is not going to end the way you think." Thank goodness it didn't.
Yeah.
Look, whatever they would have decided to do with Omega, with her M count and midichlorians, and is she force sensitive? Is she just force intuitive? Whatever. What is she? All these things out there. There was no mention of that at all. Was not a factor. Well, would it have been fun or interesting? I guess, but we've seen that a bunch of times. We saw it with countless Star Wars stories where suddenly somebody is able to use the Force. Mm-hmm. And that would have been the quick and easy way to do it. It would have been safe. It would have been very Star Wars, but they didn't go the saccharine route. And I'm glad they didn't. Yeah. I'm glad that she can just be special because she's special. And she can be cool because she's cool, because she's fearless, because she's resolute, because, as Mason keeps saying, she's very loyal. She's very, very skilled. And she is awesome because she's awesome. And I'm glad that that door is open, or, just make it a revolving door. I don't know. It doesn't matter. What matters is that I like that they didn't do that. If they would have done it, I'm confident that Jennifer and the team would have made it fabulous. Confident of that. But they didn't. And I'm glad they didn't, because they let it stand on its own. Because one of the nice things that you mentioned, Mary, is that this series has been able to survive without Skywalkers in the Force and Jedi. It really hasn't been an issue. You've got Gunji. Right. You saw Kanan Jarrus for like 5 seconds, who was Caleb Dune then. You saw Taj Ventress very, very briefly. But none of those things were factors. And I'm very glad about that. Mason, were you hoping to see Omega with the Force, or were you okay with this, how it ended too?
No, when we were watching it, I thought, it crossed my mind, and I thought, no, I hope they don't do this, because it should end how the Bad Batch should end, not how the Skywalker saga should end.
Absolutely. And I did something very un-Dan Zehr-like when I was watching this, because Mason and I watched this super early in the morning like we used to with Mandalorian. It was great fun. We had our blue milk that we drank with our cereal and our coffee. So, Mason didn't have coffee, just his dad. And we were talking during the show and making comments. I never do that. I'm usually like a librarian. Shout out to Tom Gross. And we just were talking and enjoying the experience. It was really, really fun. So that has nothing to do with the conversation, but I appreciate that. That was fun, Mason.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because Chaz and I kind of did the same thing. There were a number of times that we commented to each other about different things, which normally we're usually sitting there, just watching, and we did the same thing. I think that was part of the fun of this episode, mm-hmm. is that you got into it, but you also, if you were watching with someone, you wanted to share what was going on.
Mm-hmm. That's true, because there's a lot to share. And speaking of that, Mason, it's back to you. What's something else you want to talk about that stood out?
Okay, I want to talk about how we never see Emery without her goggles, but when she gets to Pabu, you see her without her goggles. And I think that is like a sign of freedom. You're free of all of the guiltiness and the things that you've done in the Empire, and you're trying to start a new life.
Beautiful. Well, spoken like an English teacher. That's great. Yeah, I like the symbolism of that. I'm very impressed that you caught that, Mason. Those glasses that she wore were from the Empire, presumably from just that entire experiment with M count, right? That Dr. Hemlock had been using. So now that she's free of the shackles, of the metaphorical shackles of the Empire, she can see clearly because she's taken the Imperial lens from her line of vision. She can able to see clearly, and we don't see it till she's on Pabu, which is beautiful and open and full of nature anyway, as opposed to the sterile, dark walls of the interior of this base on Tantus. So that's a really, really insightful one. Mary, what's the next thing you'd like to talk about?
Well, I think Nala say, we knew there might be some sacrifices that would happen at the end. And I know, like you said before, we were all afraid that it was going to be sort of a Rogue One kind of an ending, and everyone was going to be sacrificing themselves to do whatever they needed to do to save the clones, save Omega, save the world, the universe from Tantus and the cloning that was going on. And Nala Se has always in this series protected Omega, whether we realized it at first or not, but then we knew what finally was going on and why she was protecting her. But not only was she protecting Omega, she was staying a Kaminoan to the end. She was protecting her people and what they had created and what belonged to them that the Empire had taken from them. And if it meant destroying everything, her entire life work and the Kaminoans before her and the ones that she worked with side by side to create our original clones, she had no qualms in sacrificing herself and everything that she had worked for her entire life to keep the Empire from getting that information, that data, all of that work that she knew could be used in not the right way and not the way that they had presumably originally meant to use it for.
And you got the sense that even with, I don't know, I think even without Omega, she felt like they were being used and manipulated, yes. And she was able to take some power for herself and some agency, yes. Unfortunately at the expense of her life, but she saves Omega, saves her work, and then she saves anyone else from going through further pain, because without that information, without all that data, then you're not going to be checking blood counts of other people, of other children, because they don't know how to connect those dots. Now, it's so ironic because I was actually watching with my students today the episode The Siege from season 2 of The Mandalorian. It's actually the 12th episode. And this is when they first discover something about an M count. And when the Mandalorian realizes that Moff Gideon is alive and they're doing those experiments. So, it's kind of easy to see there's somewhat of a bridge there, but there's absolutely missing a lot of pieces of information for itself. The scene you mentioned makes me think about what I want to talk about next, and that's Rampart. Rampart for the past couple of episodes has been really quite enjoyable for me. And when he had said last episode that, people don't change, he didn't believe the Crosshair changed, and I speculated he thinks that because he hasn't changed. And unfortunately, I was right. He didn't change. He was super dastardly and using these things, this information to try to blackmail the Emperor. Was that what he was going to do? I mean, it reminds me of The Dark Knight when there's a man that wants to blackmail Lucius Fox and Bruce Wayne. He says, "Let me get this straight," and I'm paraphrasing. This man, who's the richest man in Gotham and makes his living beating up criminals within an inch of their life, you want to blackmail him? Good luck, is what he says. And good luck blackmailing the Emperor, because it's not going to work out. He doesn't even get a chance because he gets blowed up, as they would say. And I was a little disappointed with that. I mean, I don't know that I wouldn't necessarily see him be redeemed, but I don't know. It would have been kind of fun to see more of him. But yeah, at the end, he was kind of reduced to just being an Imperial stooge, and that's what he was. but he did serve a purpose, and he helped them get to Omega. Without him, it wouldn't have happened. So it's interesting. It'll be interesting to rewatch some of these episodes with him again to see if we see little cracks in that armor. But he played his part. He was who he was, right? He was who he showed himself to be. So that what did the two of you think of Rampart? Were you disappointed, or did you sort of expect it?
I was disappointed.
You were? Well, how come?
Yeah, because he like you said, he was starting to grow on us, and we were like, oh, he's gonna be good, but nope.
Or at least neutral.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And he was still only out for himself. Mary, do you have Rampart woes, or have you moved on?
No, I think I've moved on. I think Rampart was always out for himself, even from way back when we first met him, to the point of when they broke him out of prison to help them. And he was just looking at what angle can he use to get what he wants. And he was always aware of what was going on around him. For him to meet his doom quite that way, I think was a little interesting, but it was also a way to sort of show that the Empire is not getting this. Even though you were wanting to use it in a different way and try to blackmail or extort or do whatever, you're still being stopped. So both ways, the Empire and an agent of the Empire is being stopped from taking this from the Kaminoans and from Nalase. So I guess it was sort of poetic justice.
Indeed it was. Yeah, he had wronged the Kaminoans and Nalase so often. So here we go. She at the end she took care of business. Mason, you're up next.
Honestly, let's just talk about the fight at the end with Hemlock. Let's just say how Hunter and Crosshair had to have, like my word, loyalty to take that shot and know when Omega was going to do what and just where to put it and how she was going to move the wrists and just how they executed that whole thing.
It was a very tense scene, but it was great to get Crosshair his hero moment, I think. Mary?
Yeah, I think in that scene it was interesting that Crosshair was not with them for the past 2 seasons. He did not see the growth of Omega. He did not see her become the soldier that she has become. And I think Hunter had to sort of help him see that. He had to sort of nudge him and say, okay, we'll wait for Omega. She's going to show us when to do this. And I think at first Crosshair thought, excuse me? But then he just very quickly went on board with it, and he knew what to do. But I think he had to be prodded a little bit because he's seen some of her growth, but he hasn't seen all of it, and from the beginning to where she is now. So I believe he really has grown to, or from that point on, grew to respect her and be loyal, like Mason said, to her even more.
And then the best thrilling, the most wonderful part about that, and the thing that got me more emotional than anything in the entire episode, is after he's defeated and they both run up to her and she looks at them both and she grabs Crosshair first and hugs him. And that, I have goosebumps on. That was just so beautiful. Yeah, earlier in the episode, Crosshair was willing to execute his own version of was it Plan 99, right?
Right.
And they said, oh no, we all know the risks, which was an awesome, kind of a very brotherhood moment. But so he gets his redemption, but through love, not through violence. And that was just so beautiful. I really, really like that. All right, Mary. Well, what is next on your list?
Project Stardust. When Tarkin said Project Stardust, Chaz and I both went, there you go. I mean, it just rolled right in. And you knew that was in the back of his mind when he visited or did the hollow visit with Hemlock earlier. It's wanting to know why he was spending all the money and questioning all the funds, because you knew he had this little other project that is starting over on the side. And it was it was a nice little nod. It was one of those things that, if you haven't watched all of the movies, not just the Skywalker saga, but all of the movies, did that one little phrase go over your head? And there are some people that, I know that they've only watched episodes 1 through 9. They haven't watched the other movies. They haven't, watched a lot of the, of course, those people probably weren't watching this anyway, so it doesn't matter. But, but yeah, I loved it. But what really kind of surprised me with Tarkin, there were a couple of times in the trailer that it looked like one of the planets was sort of destroyed. And we were thinking that maybe the Empire would get to Pabu or whatever. And I told Chaz, I said, I wonder if Tarkin's just going to say, light it up as far as Mount Tantus, but he didn't. And then that old person in me that read the Heir to the Empire and, all the original Timothy Zahn books, I went, okay, wait a minute. There's some more things that go on at Mount Tantus. So we didn't see it get destroyed. But I thought that they really did a nice job of peppering in Tarkin this season, especially, not really letting us kind of know where it was going, but sort of an idea again. But as soon as he said Stardust, we were just like, yep, there you go. That's it. And Stephen Stanton is just fantastic as Tarkin.
Yes, he is. Well, it's sort of neat because Mason and I last weekend went to the movie theater and saw Rogue One on the big screen here.
Nice.
It was just shown for one special time. So I'm like, when it said Project Stardust, he and I looked at each other and just smiled because, yes. And, we already know that in the Empire, amongst the higher ups, there's always rivalries and infighting and all that stuff. It would have meant for a great episode of Knots Landing or Dallas. Those of you who have any idea what I'm talking about, that will be funny for you. Maybe it will. Crosshair, I want to talk about him some more because I didn't realize it at first. I mean, they certainly made it seem like, because there are these clones, it's almost like, are they one of the initial versions of the Dark Troopers, or are they just a modification of those clone trooper X's that we've seen throughout? They're so highly trained. I'm glad they didn't make it so that we saw who these were. Like, they were bald and I thought, oh, Jesus, these are going to be clones of Tech or something like that. And they didn't do that. Again, no gimmicks. Very happy with that. But Crosshair, this entire time, his hand has been bothering him, and it reminds him of the torture and the misery he had on Tantus. And then he doesn't have to worry about it because his hand is severed by a really cool, unique weapon. But when it happened, Mason said, "What did you say? You said something about it. What did you say? Do you remember, Mace?"
Oh, when they showed a scene, I forget which one, but they showed a scene where his hand wasn't on, and I remember the scene where the guy raised his blade and he said, you got to be more careful with your shooting hand. And I said, Dad, look, his hand's off. And he said, what? He actually did chop it off? But yeah, he did. Because
they moved the camera away. Mm-hmm. And they did some nice work with the music there too, really powerful. And I thought, are they really going to do that? And they didn't show it. On X-Men 97, they would probably show it, but that's a story for another time, which is absolutely terrific. But this, again, listen to CWK Pour-Over. We talk all about it on the show. But it stunned me, but that's when again, they're throwing these things in there to show you that no one, anything can happen, right? But I think symbolically, when he loses his hand, there's a part of me that thinks, and this is just my own, English teacher randomness, but for me in my life, in my experiences, and people I know, when you have trauma, when you don't deal with your trauma, it gets dealt with, and you have no control over it, right? I'm not saying that if Crosshair had done more meditating or talking to someone professionally, that wouldn't have happened to him. It probably would have. But it was just ironic that now he doesn't have to worry about his hand twitching because he doesn't have it anymore. It was like an interesting sign to me that you have to deal with the things that are holding you back, that are affecting you, because at some point you're going to need to. right? Now, would he have made that shot easier at the end? No, not necessarily. He's already a great shot no matter what. He made that shot that Mason alluded to before with the handcuffs without that hand because he's crosshair and that's his unique, very high level skill set. But I was really interested in that. He was also liberated from things that held him back. And I think that was the end of his self-loathing too. I really do. I just think once Omega's exclamation points out by hugging him, he's different now, and he has been different. But I think he's finally forgiven himself and redeemed himself in his own eyes. And really, some really heavy stuff there. I need to think about that some more because I think there's more to it.
Yeah, I mean, it just shows that like you said, severing of the hand is putting the past behind him, letting him go forward without having that reminder of what happened to him at Mount Tantus. That reminder is now gone, and he can put it in his past. He doesn't have to continue to look at it by having that physical manifestation of his hand shaking. He can now move forward without that, and he can grow, which we don't really see later, but we assume.
Right. And it's hard not to think scripturally, if your hand is causing you to sin, cut it off, right? It wasn't causing him to sin, but it was just a reminder of these terrible things. So now it's dealt with. It's very interesting stuff. The Zillow Beast was great. It did what I was hoping would happen, smash things and run around. It was probably one of the more fun kaiju things I've seen in any medium because you actually care about the humans. That's why Godzilla -1 is so great because it's one of the few kaiju movies where you actually care about the humans. Obviously, in this we do. The Zillow Beast, I didn't realize it had this weird extra thing on its back besides its tail. I don't know where that came from. Maybe it's always been there. We just haven't seen it fully animated. But that was a lot of fun. I'm sure our friend Neil Baker from last week got a kick out of that. But what else do you two want to talk about? There's something I want to throw out that didn't work for me as well. But are there any other things you want to talk about that? Well, how about the ending? Mason, walk us through the ending. Did it remind you of Harry Potter, sort of? The end of the Harry Potter 7th book?
It kind of did because it gives you that feeling like they aren't going to do a sequel to this like they did to Harry Potter with the Cursed Child. Mm-hmm. But it just gives you that feeling everything's going to be all right. They can take care of themselves now, and they're going to live a nice life.
And you loved it, right?
Yeah, I think it was a nice add-on.
I do too, but before I babble, I want to hear what Mary thinks.
Well, you knew when everything went black there as Omega was putting her head on Hunter's shoulder and Batcher sitting there underneath the tree and then Crosshair and Wrecker come over and sit down and they both sort of had exactly the same way they were sitting, just sort of mirrored. Mm-hmm. And you're like, okay, all's right with the world. And these characters have gone through their trials and tribulation. They've come out the other side. And like Echo said to Emery, that they are now able to live their own lives. They don't have to worry about someone else telling them what to do. And then when it went black and no music, I don't remember there really being music, that it was just silent and went black. And Chaz went, okay, I wonder how big this time jump's going to be. I mean, he immediately knew that we were going to have a time jump. And my first impression of Omega as she walked, into the frame and, into the cave, that apparently they finally figured out everybody else knew about this secret cave and now they're using it, however many years later. But I just said, she's gorgeous and she is strong. Mm-hmm. And I think they did a very nice job of animating her. And again, the voice acting of Michelle with her and wanting to go and fight for the rebellion and mentioning the rebellion. And so it's like, how old is she? We don't know exactly. So we don't know exactly how far in the time frame. And of course, maybe they'll say something when they release the information on StarWars.com tomorrow, how they always, give us that little data bank thing. But just that And then referring back to, even though all we saw was Hunter, referring back to Wrecker and Crosshair. We know they're still there. The only thing that sort of bothered me a little bit, and I'm not sure if this is where you're going to go, is we still don't know, and maybe we will soon, because they kind of alluded to more information about Ventress and so forth. But what about Cody? What about Rex and what's going on with him? What about Rex and Wolf and Gregor? How they end up on that planet when Ahsoka, and the rebel crew finds them later, fishing for that creature and so forth. So that's still very, very much a question that we did not have answered. And I didn't expect everything to be answered. And I think they did a good job of answering the main points of the series, but there are still some things out there that we don't know about.
I'd forgotten about the fact that, we don't ever see Cody. He leaves at the end. I think, is it season 2, first episode, I think?
Yeah, it's early on.
Yeah. As far as the epilogue, I thought it was very, very, very well done, very classy. Omega did look beautiful and composed. And of course, she wants to be a pilot. And we think back to when she learned how to fly, and didn't Tech help teach her to fly? And she's got Tech's goggles in the cockpit. And I love that this whole season there wasn't like a sad fest for Tech. There were some little nods, but it wasn't about that, because they move forward, because they're still living to be done in a way that honors him, and in a way that honors his sacrifice, right? That's a huge component of all of this. So I thought it was really nice. I wanted something. I just wanted a little something, at least. And if if clones age twice as much, and Hunter says he's old, he's got the gray beard and the gray hair. So I don't know how old he is, and he's probably in his mid-20s, maybe. So my guess is it's probably been 20 years, 25 years since then. That would make sense. She's got that great jacket on. Her hair's longer. It's the second time we've seen in this season where Omega's hair is showing us a passage of time. And she ages normally, I believe. Isn't that right, Mason? Did they say she's unaltered?
Yes, I think so.
I think so too. She and Boba. And there was no Boba either. He's the Alpha. Presumably she's the Omega. It was so cool. It was so good. As far as is that going to count as, is that one of the things that just didn't work for you, what you just mentioned, Mary? Because you could certainly be the one that kicked that off, or was there something else?
No, I think that was it. I wish we would have had a little bit more back to our regs to sort of see where they were at, and maybe that's something they're planning to do in the future. I don't know, but and of course, like you say, we try not to speculate much, but I would have liked to have had, even if it was a line, when they were on Pabu, when Echo and Emery were talking, and they were getting ready to go to Pantora. And he mentioned Senator Chuchi and the fight for the clones, how important she is for the clones. Another little line there, maybe just to comment on what, say, Rex and the group were doing. But I really wish we had more than that. Cody was AWOL.
Sure.
He was, and that's that one clone that really kind of came over from the live action, from the original, the prequels, into the animation, and that a lot of people, really identified with. And I think in the end, in Clone Wars, Rex became really the clone that everybody truly identified. Yeah, he was it. But I would like to have seen that, I think.
And Mason used to say that Cody was his favorite. Is Cody still your favorite character? Yes. Really?
Yeah.
See, well, there you go. Did it bother you that you get to see them like Mary did?
Yeah, I thought it was weird. Like, they should have added something else. But also with just Crosshair and Wrecker, like, and Echo, like, no mention to where they are or anything. They should just put something in there. Like, with Hunters there, where are they? Like, that's their home now.
Sure. Those things, well, I noticed them, didn't bother me, because at the end of this is really Omega and Hunter's story. Omega's the main character, and Hunter, all of them are her family, but Hunter is just got that. He's as close to a dad as I think she has. And the fact that they're not there, but they're talked about fondly, means that they're around, that they're in her life, but they're doing their own thing. They've got their own stuff going on. So I'm glad I want it wrapped up, because I've always said a good story has a beginning, a middle, and end that sufficiently wraps up all the narrative threads. And this did. Like, I didn't need to see that. But I do have one pretty significant quibble that I do want to talk about. And for me, it's what happens with Hemlock. I think Hemlock, it's pretty clearly established that as long as he's alive, his ambition, his intelligence, the danger that he presents, not only Omega, but the clones in general, he is a massive liability. So it's said pretty early on that he's got to be eliminated, and he's killed. Look, he's a bad guy. And I get that, but there's just a part of me that just thinks, well, this show is so smart, and it breaks very strong archetypes and forges its own path. But at the end, this becomes an 80s action movie where in order to win, you have to kill the bad guy. And that's the myth of redemptive violence. I don't love that as a parent, as a fan of literature. What else would you have done? I don't know. I'm not the storyteller that they are. I'm not saying that it was wrong. I'm not saying it wasn't a good story. I'm not saying it didn't fit the narrative, because it did. I'm just saying it's too bad that that's how we dealt with this guy. I mean, through a blast, through a gunshot, through a blaster shot, have him get hoisted on his own petard and killed by the Zillow Beast or something. Now that would be fun. Something like that. But a blaster shot, I get it's kind of the mano-a-mano thing, but that was something that felt a little flat for me. Is it going to affect my letter grade or how I look at this series? Not at all. But it is something that I had to at least bring up.
Well, and the other thing with Hemlock is they never really explained his hand, what was going on with his hand.
True.
I would like to have had that explanation. Yeah,
and that's that thing where do you want the question or do you want the answer? I sort of like that I don't know, but I wouldn't have been sad to know. Mm-hmm. Hopefully he'll show up again someday. I am glad that they did, there's no more evidence. Okay, let's put a net over the space. All the bad guys are gone. Like, they actually wrapped up. There aren't these like weird things that are hanging out there so we can read about it later or see it, 10 years later as an Easter egg. I mean, anything can happen. A good storyteller can do anything. But that was pretty great. It was pretty great that they wrapped it all up. Mason, is there anything that you would like to talk about that didn't work for you before we wrap up?
It's not that it didn't work for me, this part that I'm about to say, but I thought it would have been cool if it happened. I thought when Tarkin showed up, Vader should have also showed up with Tarkin.
I wouldn't have been sad either. That would have been cool. That would have been really cool. But it was not to be. He's busy elsewhere causing havoc. Well, let's give. Is there anything else that we want to talk about before we give our letter grades? I feel pretty good about the ground we covered, and I know we'll certainly talk a lot about this next Monday night at 7:00 p.m. Central Standard Time on CWK Live, where you listening now can share your top 5 moments from the final episode, The Cavalry Has Arrived. Mary or Mason, anything else before we give our letter grades and final thoughts?
Nope.
Well, the only thing that I can think about is just the music, as we've talked about so many times on
the Kiner Brothers.
Yes. Oh my gosh, they've just killed it. And the music at the beginning of the episode was amazing. It's just even before the Bad Batch logo all grayed out came on screen, that music was starting, and then to see the Bad Batch logo match what they did to their armor with everything grayed out and not having the red tinges any longer, not being part of really not, I think, kind of a symbolism of taking it away from being part of the Clone Wars. Like now we've moved on. And it's because that original one where it was the Clone Wars logo and it burned out and became the Bad Batch logo, and that red always stayed there, and now it's all totally grayed out. So now they are their own thing. They are their own entity and to end everything. So I thought they just did an amazing job with that symbolism, and then the music again, and then just Joel Aaron and the lighting. Once again, just the amazing animation that we just see episode after episode. To think about what we started with Clone Wars back in 2008 and how that has progressed through those 7 seasons, the 4 seasons of Rebels, and now these 3 seasons, and just the scope of the change and the finesse and sometimes almost lifelike looking animation, is just amazing. And then the other thing that Chaz and I were talking about earlier, and Dane, I don't know if you were there or not, but one of the celebrations, they actually showed some old renderings of what would become the Bad Batch way before they talked about the Bad Batch series. And they were just showing some of the things that had been rendered but weren't complete. And
2015, I think that was Celebration Anaheim with Pablo.
Yeah.
I was there.
Yeah. So how they changed some of the things, and how Padme was originally on the side of the ship, and then they changed that in the and all this stuff.
That's right.
Yeah. So it's like it's come full circle from 2008 to 2024, and with all of these characters and where we're at now.
And Star Wars is better for it. It's so better for it. There was something else you brought up I wanted to comment. Oh, I'm so impressed with the analysis of the opening logo and how it is like a nice bookend to the very first episode ever. I didn't even think about that. That's really good, Mary Perdue.
Well, thank you.
Yes, I love that. All right. We're going to wrap up the show, give our letter grade and final thoughts. Mason, please share yours with us for the last time for the Bad Batch. Your letter grade and final thoughts.
This one will definitely be an anonymous vote. Hands down, A+.
Any last minute thoughts on it?
It was the perfect ending to the series, and like you said, it could have been the final to just normal season. Except for the very end. Yeah, so one quick question. So you haven't seen all Clone Wars. You've seen Rebels. You've seen a little bit of Star Wars Resistance, and you've seen the Bad Batch. You can even throw Tales of the Jedi in there. Where do you rank the Bad Batch? I'd say probably second or third. Okay. What's your 1 and 2? I'd say 1 is Mandalorian easily, and then 2 or 3 would be Baby Rebels. Okay, right on. Mary, your letter grade and final thoughts.
I think I have to agree with Mason, an A+. They answered so many things. They gave us happy tears instead of really sad tears, which I talked about with David on Star Wars Reactions a couple of weeks ago. That I was hoping that, because they kept saying, pull out the tissues, and I kept saying, I'm hoping they're for happy tear tissues and not sad tear tissues. So I was glad to see that happen. I think they did a great job, like I said, of wrapping it all up. Like George Lucas said many years ago, everything rhymes. Things kind of again came full circle, and we can feel good about what this group of people did, and how they treated one another, and how they treated others that they came across, and that they always had hope.
Mm-hmm. Yes, they did. They always had hope. It's certainly an A+. It's finales, historically are a mixed bag for me, because there are certain things that I hope for as a fan and just as an academic who studies stories for a living and loves stories and the art of storytelling. And it was beautiful. They answered the questions that should have been answered. They left some nice little nuggets on the floor, but they aren't essential to understanding the story that wraps up everything in a very, very satisfying way and does honor and homage not only to the saga, but to these beloved characters that we hold very, very close to our hearts.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are, with Dan Z, the podcast you're looking for. This is...
And of course, I hold the two of you very, very close to my heart. Mary, thank you so much, as always, for sharing your time and talents with us on Coffee with Kenobi, whether it's on CWK Live or in the cafe or all of your fabulous guest spots and all of our peers in this wonderful Star Wars community. You always bring knowledge and kindness and friendship, and we're so grateful for you. Where can people reach out to you if they want to continue the conversation with you?
Thank you, Dan. That's very kind of you to say. I'm on Instagram at Mary N Chaz. It's MaryNChazz. If anybody has a question, wants to bring something into a direct message, that's fine. I'm on Twitter X some, and it's Mary_Perdue, Perdue, like the chicken, not the university. And always trying to be around, the cafe and interact there if in different things that people will post up or I'll post up. It's a great community that you've built. I have a lot of fantastic friends, including you guys, because of you. And so people have asked, some of my family have said, how do you meet some of these people? And I said, well, Star Wars.
That's right. Star Wars. Well, thank you for all you do. And Mason, we talk about this a lot, and you're very sweet and very humble. But of course, I love you, buddy. You are the best co-pilot I could ever have. I love talking about Star Wars: The Bad Batch with you. There's nothing like it. You make everything better, and I'm just so grateful for you for sharing your time and your talents, because you're a busy guy too. Just because you're 10 doesn't mean you're not busy with school and baseball and hobbies and taking the Fortnite world by storm, all the great things you do. I'm just so grateful for you and so happy to call you my co-pilot, and more importantly, my son.
Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. And please, as always, make sure to get your top 5 list ready for next week for CWK Live. You can get your top 5 list ready. Share your top 5 moments of The Cavalry Has Arrived, and then stay tuned to the show where you can find out what are we going to be talking about on CWK Live, and maybe we'll talk about a really spectacular show that's going to be dropping on Coffee with Kenobi on May the 4th. Happy Star Wars Day in advance, everyone. Have a great, great time. And this is Dan Zehr reminding you that this is the podcast you're looking for.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.